Welcome to our podcast from the ground up, where we interview startup founders exploring their journeys, their success, challenges, and lessons learned. We hope you be inspired in discovering what it takes to build a thriving startup. I'm your host, Jake Aaron Villarreal, and here with us today we have Austin Talley, the founder and CEO of Everyware. Austin, welcome to the show.
Hey, Jake, great to be here. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, great. Well, thanks for jumping in here. A little background on Austin. He launched Everywhere, which is a leading customer engagement billing and payments technology company based in Austin, Texas, providing services to more than 9,000 merchants across multiple verticals. It's a lot of merchants. We'll get into it here. Before we do, Austin, well, where are you calling in from today?
So Austin from Austin, Texas. So that's where I'm calling in from today.
All right, great. And are you from there originally?
Originally, I'm actually from New York and then spent a great deal spending time in Florida where I built another tech company and then moved to Austin back in 2018. So right place, right time.
That's great. So many companies are moving to Texas, Florida, benefits for a lot of different reasons, but I've been to Austin. I love it. A lot going on there. A lot of good companies innovating there too, which is really cool to see outside of Silicon Valley. Before we dive into your company, I want to go back a little bit deeper and farther into your startup experience. You had a couple companies you built, but let's even go farther back. Where did this all start from? You got into technology. How did that come about?
Yeah, I really started early on in my life where I felt like, that was a space I wanted to be in. I came from really a poor upbringing with really no way or path to go to college. So I felt like my only choice at the time was the military. So the military is really where I got my first, really, call it opportunity, to become a software programmer. And that's really where I kind of honed in on my skills and got an early start. But, I would say right around the age 18 years old, picked up a book and just started really studying it, figuring things out. In the military, they tend to do things very fast, rapid development. So I felt like just getting ahead of the curve by learning, I would say, Windows 95. And this is
Oh, wow.
1995, the year that I'm talking about. So, this is something that was very new to the military. And so I felt like I can get more or less a head start since they were, going in that direction, getting off those green screens.
So when you were learning technology in the military, were there courses? Were you kind of doing it on your own, and they were plugging you into systems to work on? What was the process like for you?
Yeah, it was really like in two parts. They had the legacy, so learn the current system, and which I did that. But I was really more focusing on what was cutting edge, what was coming around the corner, where I can really make an impact in the military at a young age. So as much as I took the courses that were really again focused around traditional, call it Fox Pro, old legacy, systems, I was really taking courses myself, really just by studying and reading books that were coming out from Microsoft, and really taking advantage of really like Microsoft Access and SQL, which was really new to the military. But again, having the opportunity to learn that, they allowed me to use those types of tools and products, even though again they weren't fully certified or backed by the military at that time.
And how many years were you in the military?
I spent about 5 years in the military. So being there, you're exposed to a lot, and again, it's rapid development, rapid deployment. Everything moves very, very fast. So being able to write systems and do it, better, faster than using traditional legacy platforms like Fox Pro and some of the older languages. I felt like I was banging out databases in SQL at a much faster rate than the military, typically does.
That's great. So we'll fast track a little bit here. You're in the military, you grew up, you learned how to code, develop. You have a couple startup experiences under your belt before you started your current company. What were you building? What did you start? And what was that experience like?
Yeah, one of the first applications that I built was very unique. It was actually connecting directly to the satellites. And at the time, we didn't have cell phones because, again, 1995, we weren't even allowed to use email on a ship. You had internal email, and it was more or less like an intranet environment with no access real to the internet. But I was able to tap into a phone system that allowed me access to a satellite where I was able then to actually use it to transform data and have it actually printed on pieces of paper. So the use case was your loved ones at home can send a message to a sailor from thousands of miles away. And again, there was no email, but we could do this by leveraging a satellite that allowed me to take it and transform it into text and ultimately print it off like a copier and hand deliver it to folks on the ship.
Talk about hitting where the heart lives. I mean,
Right. So
that's great. Yeah,
it's like Twitter at
that's
140 characters or less, basically.
yeah, that's really cool. Did you end up building that into a company, a sizable company? What was the transition like, starting that with the idea, solving a problem with the use case, and then kind of scaling it, or what happened to the company?
Yeah, so for that, it was more or less just having it adopted. In this case, by the Navy fleet. It was the Sixth Fleet that adopted this technology and used it, for quite some time, and definitely for a few years before email was allowed on the ship. Because email was still pretty new, it wasn't secure enough. So this lasted a few years, and it was more or less, me of just trial and error with that. It wasn't something that I was really looking to make a, call it, blow it up to some big application. I knew that it had a short lifespan, that there was a
Hmm.
need for it at the time. But ultimately, it got me into building systems around like customer engagement. And ultimately, that's where I live today, even, call it 20 something years later. So building CRMs, building sales and marketing systems. When I first started my first company, that was really my niche. I was starting a company that leveraged and built CRMs and sales marketing systems for all the major hotels. And it was through that experience that led me to build the company that I have today.
That's great. Well, we'll talk about Everywhere. I love the name, by the way. I'm shocked that more companies haven't had a name like that. Maybe there are, but I'd love to talk to you a little bit more about just the name itself. But as the experience coming out of the military and leading companies today, what experience helped shape who you are as a leader from the military?
Yeah, so for the military, it's all about time, and you have to be on time and present, and you also have to have the ability to stand out. In other words, in the military, when you're especially with a group of whether thousands or just hundreds of individuals that all wear the same uniform, same haircut style, potentially even like the same job, right? You have to make an impact and stand out. And one way to doing that is just showing your value, right? The value in your strengths. In this case, it was me having a tech background that somewhat came naturally. So having the ability to also become a strong leader. In other words, like, always having a press uniform, always being the first one to show up, last one to leave, willing to go the extra mile. A lot of those strengths still live with me today. Getting out of bed early, nobody likes. I mean, I still don't like it today, but it's something that I know I can get a head start because most people, don't even get up to say, call it 7 or 8 a.m. And I feel like I had the advantage, whether it be getting up and just working out, getting up, meditating, getting up, and just being more active and being more present, focusing on, my day. Whereas, again, a lot of us, coming up from the young age, especially going through the corporate ranks, some of us really pick up speed more or less in our 30s. I just had the ability to do it at a much younger age. In this case, my early 20s.
Yeah, yeah, really cool. Let's talk about Everywhere. What inspired you to create what you have today?
Once upon a time, it was nowhere, right? So, but what it really inspired me was use cases that I solved. So, if we ever stayed, for instance, like at a Hilton hotels, 20 years ago, I was looking at ways to replace the front desk and streamline communication and use like a fancy bot name like Ivy. That ultimately you didn't know if it was a human or a bot because I would use real phone numbers, but yet the communication was centralized, but it acted like the independent resort. In this case, it was really meant to upgrade you or upsell you prior to arrival. And if you stay at these hotels, you're getting these text messages today. But ultimately, it was reducing chargebacks, customer service complaints, and a lot of problems, and doing it very fast. So it was solving a lot of use cases, like, call it like in 100 characters or less, that really made an impact. And I felt like, man, like this could, work everywhere, kind of hence the name. So I designed like a hidden bee in our icon that's still out there today on the internet. And that B really, I just stuck in front because I didn't have the domain everywhere.com yet. So I didn't focus on that. What I focused in on was just building out a product with a combination of communication and payments that could work everywhere. And I would visualize early on what it would look like if Twilio and Stripe had a baby. And hence, it was born. And soon after that, I was able to secure the .com, and it was like liftoff.
Wow. So for the listeners out there that don't know maybe technology at the level that a lot of the entrepreneurs that are on the show have, what give us a specific use case. You said hotels, but is it more on the customer engagement side of things where your technology integrates? Walk us through like the flow of how it works, and maybe a different use case, or even that same one.
Yeah, a different use case, it would be an industry like automotive. I mean, the last thing you want to do is accept a credit card over the phone, and have it turn into being a chargeback, especially if it's for like $5,000, because it's more common now to buy a car from, call it hundreds or even thousands of miles away. And the last thing you want to do is to find out 3 months later, after that car was already delivered, that it was a chargeback, that it was fraudulent, right? So being able to not accept transactions on over the phone, being able to actually have the identity. So I always feel like if you give me your cell phone number behind the scenes, I have your social, your birthday, your house you live in. And if I don't, then immediately you're already high risk, because our cell phone numbers are very much unique. And that's something that doesn't really change all too often. There's a lot of history associated with that. So in industries like auto, where you're taking these down payments or even buying a used vehicle for an excessive amount of money, you want to make sure that it sticks, and the company's not losing money. So with us, the transaction is completed on their own device. We have an identity layer built into it. So before we even process the credit card, we already know everything about you. So we can basically raise a red flag to slow down the transaction or stop it altogether.
Wow, that's amazing. Talk a little bit about what that means. Identity payments. Um, Walk us through what that is and why you're leading the way in 2024 around this concept.
So there's more digital tokens being issued today. So digital tokens meaning that digital transactions where your card's being tokenized. So there's less pieces of plastic being issued, and in a lot of cases now you're not even going to businesses. They're not even accepting cash. So being able to secure a transaction with your identity built in and do it within 0 seconds. So in other words, in that use case that I just walked through, you gave me your cell phone number before you even gave me your credit card or even put your credit card information in even into your own device. I already have all your data. And in this case, as you put your credit card information in, if things, don't line up or look a little fishy, again, we have that ability to stop that transaction or slow it down. So it would request further review. And we further review, we have an advanced identity that'll send you another text message and just say, Jake, for your convenience, can you please take a picture and of yourself and upload your driver's license or your passport, and we'll do a liveness check against you as well and make sure that the document that says who you are is real and it matches your identity, in addition to just again having all the data points behind the cell phone number. So really just having both the data points behind the phone number, and then also having an advanced way of making sure that person is who they say they are, in the payment industry is really going to help mitigate a tremendous amount of risk. And there's a lot of fraud out there. And the fraud right now is, again, it's even gotten, larger. They're getting more creative. And the fact that today you can walk into a store and I can use your credit card right now and do tap to pay and not even touch anything. And so you're really seeing a lot of fraud around those types of transactions. So this right here is a great way to solve it. It's a great way to solve it because, today if I forgot my password for my bank account, you're going to send me a text message, right? And it's being used more and more as, call it two-factor or multi-factor authentication. So we feel that, as we look into the future, the cell phone number is very powerful and it's very close to being, everyone's unique identifier, that's used for not only payment transactions, but ultimately for who you are, right? And it's just a great way to get a hold of you, because we're all checking our text messages, and we might get a million emails. Some of them go to junk, but text, you're pretty safe as far as making sure that somebody is, getting it and receiving it.
And you also don't want to get rid of your number. I mean, I lived in San Diego 20 years ago. I still have the 619 area code, and I live in Laguna Beach, which is, which should be a 949 or a different area code. And for whatever reason, like mentally, I just feel like I'm going to lose contact with the people I've met over the last 20 years. So even if I move across the country, I'm going to keep that number. And if it's tied to an identity that, helps me or protects me or is some way that I can be identified by, then I think that's great. Sounds like a sticky business in terms of keeping the number aligned with the person that's using it. So that's great. If you
Yeah.
look at everywhere in the market today, this sounds like it kind of sets you apart. But are there other things that you're doing in the space you're in that sets you apart from the competition?
Yeah, so for us, it's all about really controlling the whole pay by mobile rail experience. So having the ability to accept money is one direction or one way of doing it, but also having the ability to push money out and do real time disbursements. So for use cases such that, like insurance, where you're owed money, you'll call it $20,000, right? You believe it or not, I mean, they're still mailing people checks, right? And those checks, whether they show up 5 days later or 10 days later, it's a long time. Whereas with us, we're taking that insurance company and then pushing out a disbursement and doing it within 0 seconds, right to your debit card or to your bank account. And again, having that identity built in, we know exactly who we're sending it to. And then also giving you the ability to put that debit card in or connect to your bank account, really helps streamline that entire process, save a ton on operations costs, because I mean, who wants to manage paper checks? But in addition, to make sure that the money is received, and because there are a lot of call it fraudulent players out there that are capitalizing on mail. So in this case, it'd be very difficult in the sense of pretending or acting like you are this other person. You have to get their phone. Second, you would have to actually get their debit card or their bank account. And then again, if it's anything that basically doesn't shake out, we have that third layer, which makes you take that liveness check, through your cell phone device to verify you are who you say you are. So just having that and doing it in a way that's convenient. Again, we're all checking our text messages, and we're really getting used to this. Call it speedy, way of getting paid. Whether it's Venmo or other apps that are on our cell phone. We're very much using these apps more or less because they're convenient, right? They're, even though that sometimes they cost a little bit extra, they're ultimately it's the fast reward, the convenience of getting paid right away versus waiting weeks or days, that makes this really attractive to a lot of businesses.
So when you're out there selling your service or your product to different verticals or markets, who are you selling to?
Yeah, so for one, we're always really focusing on selling the problem, because one thing we don't want to do is get in a race to the bottom and compete on fees. And a lot of payment companies in that ecosystem traditionally, will compete on, oh, we'll just give you a lower rate. That's really not why we're doing this. We're there basically selling the problem. So our use case is really, whether it's the automotive, replacing credit card transactions being taken over the phone and on your own device, or it's connecting to a POS system where the POS system is pushing out a text message to somebody that's remote because they're not in store in the retail environment. So being able to sell into, I would call it the C-suite or the executives. Typically, our target is, somebody that's in IT, product, or CFO. Ideally, those are and call it, other software companies that have been around in the industry for quite some time. Traditionally, we're not going after or seeking startups. That for those guys, I'm sure that they go to Stripe or any of the Square or any of those other ones. For us, we're looking for like the mid-market to enterprise players out there that been around the block, have thousands of merchants, that we can do more or less a one-to-many play with our solution, more or less be a value-added service.
That's great. Can you share any big brands, any big logos that we would know about, or is it more in the middle market?
No, you can read about us with part of Visa. So Visa being, a big player, really, we have an amazing partnership. We're part of auth.net, one of the oldest payment gateway solutions out there. We're also part of CyberSource, so CyberSource, the solution again, owned by Visa. And we also work directly with the Visa Direct team. So Visa, we're the only certified pay by text solution that they offer. So we have an amazing relationship with them and our product, so much that we were able to extend that relationship into Bank of America. So Bank of America is partner, awesome customer of ours, and again, they're able to leverage everything that I just spoke about as far as collecting or pushing money out. But we also work very closely with other banks like PNC Bank. We also work with large healthcare providers like Imagine, where they've been around 30 years, send out traditionally 150 paper statements. And today those statements are now being moved to text messages. And I feel like it's ultimately saving a lot of paper, a lot of trees.
Yeah, that's great. I love there's a lot of hidden value in your company. How big are you as a company today? Are you located in Texas? Are you distributed?
Yeah, so we're located. I would say the core of our business operates out of Austin, Texas. Here, there's probably about a team of about 35 of us, but altogether about 78 employees. So the company is became very fast growing in the last couple of years. Because back in 2018, there was only about four of us, that originated and started this company. So from 2018, call it, the company has grown to over, close to about 80 folks. So it's pretty great story in the fact that we didn't go out and seek to raise 50 or $100 million. The company raised about $12 million to date, and we really became very profitable. So we're able to invest back into building out the company, the infrastructure, our teams. So, and myself as a software engineer, I finally had to put up my software engineering hat about 2 years ago, and really just focusing on building out this company. Because obviously there's a lot of departments that you really have to think about, whether it be from your HR department. Maybe I'm an HR nightmare, I don't know, but but to your customer service department, right, where it's not just about customer support but about customer success. So yeah,
Yeah,
definitely
that's great.
having those layers.
That's great. I like the evolution of the company. You had people that have stayed with you and moved with you from company to company over 20 plus years. What's inside of you that makes people want to work for you, follow you, and be part of what you're building? Because I think it's a rare trait in today's world where people stay, long with people. They end up kind of moving from company to company, and there's certain core skills that leaders have that others don't, and you can learn them, you can grow from them. What can you share with the listeners?
Yeah, I think it's really the entrepreneurial spirit, that passion, that or purpose that you feel like you have in life, and then, basically collectively finding people that you want to have that shared vision with. I was fortunate enough to still be working with the first guy that hired me while I was in the military. Scott Orlinsky, who you see online on my website, he was my very first, boss, and I would say that I was probably like five or 10, not maybe even further down the totem pole. So I can't even call him really the boss, since he was the president of a pretty large company at the time, and I was the junior IT guy. But ultimately, made such an impact in his organization. It had close to about 1,000 folks. That him and I basically became business partners, and we've been together ever since. And he saw the capabilities that I had with streamlining processes or helping that company at the time generate more revenue, to the point where basically he was ready to quit his job as president of that company and go grassroots and grind it out with me. And myself being the engineer, call it, had a good sales and marketing hat, him more of a call it an operational. He had the mindset of a CFO, the mindset of an attorney, so he can really talk the talk, and also ultimately he had the skill set that I really lacked in. So I think it was find that yin and yang, where you're both not necessarily doing the same job. And as I look across our team, I really have an amazing leadership team that, again, like, it's been with me, some of them 10, 15, 20 years. And I think a big also reason is can you hang out with this person after work? Because you're going to spend more time with them than you are with your family. And do you care enough about an individual that when mistakes happen, you don't focus in on them, but you're focusing on the solution. So I'm not there to put people down or, call it be a tyrant. I'm there to basically, be in the support system as well. Like, hey man, like if we hit rock bottom, or we're in times of, whether it's financial or it's in times where things, operational, not going in the right direction, I'm not running, you know what I mean? And I'll, so, and I want people side by side, shoulder to shoulder that share that same vision. They're not going to get scared. I call, fear of failure or failure to start. That suffers a lot in organizations where there's finger pointing or there's decisions that get made on at a, call it as a committee, where I tend to lean on people that can make very fast decisions, that can own it. And ultimately, if mistakes are happening, they're not, getting caught up in the mistake or the problem. They're more around focus on the solution. And it's been a win-win, ever since. So I've been really fortunate to really have, a solid team that's been with me for a very long time.
That's great. They say it's not the leader of the company that always makes the company. It's the people they end up hiring and the filters they use to make sure they have the right people on the team. How do you go about making sure you have the right people you bring into the company?
Yeah, so I much look at it I really think of it as like a sports team. I tend to think of it as like a sports team because before any championship, there's a lot of practice that gets involved. So looking at folks that are willing to get in the ditches, when you're early on as a startup, you have to wear many different hats. So looking for somebody that's not necessarily comes from a corporate background where they can only stay in one lane. And I think there's a point where you need folks in that in that lane. But as a young startup, when you're getting things going, you gotta focus on sometimes your weaknesses and that you're not really good at, and being able to accept that responsibility, even though it might be a burden. I always like to think of it's only temporary. Like myself, you know what I mean? There's many times where I was the help desk, I was a support ticket guy. I mean, I wore a lot of different hats. I changed my, name, had different names that I was using just because I want people to know it was the CEO responding back to them, like stuff like that, where you had to do it. And so I really looked at folks that, again, that hadn't necessarily a chip on their shoulder. They wanted more out of life. It wasn't necessarily about a paycheck. It had to be something bigger where they wanted to make an impact. So I really looked at, I would say a team. I was also in it for the long run, you know what I mean? And then ultimately, I always tell my team members, I set out a goal to create 50 new millionaires. And and that passion is really what drives me forward, because at the end of the day, I have no desire to be just a one man show or just a company of one. Having a company with, call it, where there was somebody that started at the lowest level, whether it be in sales or customer support, and becomes a millionaire because they stuck through all those challenges and didn't jump ship, or, you know what I mean? The first sign of, things are going in the wrong direction. And, early on as a startup, there's waves. We tend to be in a good wave where, the momentum and everything is really driving this company forward. But that was definitely not always the case. I mean, there was cases where, when I sold my last company that, I was running out of money, and, I didn't know necessarily if I was going to make the next payroll. Ultimately, we did. And, the team that stuck by us, and they're still with me today, those core folks. And that's really the kind of people, I want to be around with life, that are willing to basically take a bullet for you, so to speak. Hopefully never, but and that's really comes from maybe the background of being in the military, right? Where, you're not going to leave your brother behind, no matter what. That you're willing to sacrifice everything if you really believe in it or believe in that person. And I tend to, hire, folks that come from a similar mindset. A lot of athletes on our team, whether athletes that now train and do Ironmans or triathlons or marathons, or ex-hockey players. Ex-runners, played college sports. I always like, when I interview someone, I always try to focus on what's not on their resume. What are they really,
Mm.
like what motivates them? Like I can read your resume, but I'm not going to ask you those questions. I want to know a little bit more about you. And, so I want to know what does life look outside of work? What are you really passionate? What drives you? And it tends to be the athletes, whether they played high school sports, college sports, had a competitive spirit, that tends to be the driving force behind the culture that we're building out this company.
I like that filter, yeah, because you can get the competitiveness should be or has been in their background if they are an athlete competing or still competing at a high level. So that's really a good aspect to shoot for. As a startup founder, you get pulled in many different directions, whether it's product ideas or ideas that might take the company into new markets. when it comes to products, it's easy to start building things that might look nice and might work, but are they generating revenue? Are they really adding value to the core platform you're creating? What's been some lessons you've learned that you can share in that area?
Yeah, it's very difficult. As an entrepreneur that comes from a software engineer background, and I became really good also at building out product and also just the vision behind, the start of Everywhere. It was very challenging early on because we had way too much product, and people's brains can only absorb so much. So when you're raising money, I knew right away it was again about perception, about having that MVP. So I would say early on when I was building out Everywhere, I was living in South Florida in Boca Raton, and in the year of 2016, when I was just coming up with the idea, I was running it by folks out in San Francisco that were venture capitalists. And the minute I would say Boca Raton, Florida, I lost them. I lost them because their brains went to old people, travelers, so I knew perception wise that was going to be a challenge. Or, early on developing out Everywhere, there was an app associated with it. But at the time, back then, apps, man, there was so many apps out there. It was like amnesia. So I felt like, man, if I had the app and I had the phone number experience to collect money, it was just too much product for people's brains to absorb. So I really had to, scale it back and put the app on the shelf where it lives today. And it's an amazing, sexy app, and I still use it personally from my own experience because it's a great tool. But ultimately, that's not what the VCs wanted to hear. It's not what they've been willing to invest in. It was to pick that MVP, that product offering that was going to get market fit, put the money behind that, build a team around that, build the infrastructure you need to support that, and put the app on the shelf for another day. And that was very challenging and hard to do because I poured everything into building out that app. And again, when push came to shove, man, if I really wanted this company to move forward, I had to have less product and really focusing around solving the problem, with that MVP. And having that mobile number, it just seemed like that was the experience and what folks were looking for. And then having that experience to allow two-way communication and collect money, yeah, that was very unique. And then also go horizontal. And a lot of times companies, are more focused on solving problems vertically specific. And again, so it's a very much of a challenge as you think as a horizontal approach, because all these different verticals come with their own uniqueness. And again, if I'm going to be a company, whereas in the beginning I would focus on building a product around the travel industry, but it wouldn't apply to healthcare or auto. So I had to really again take a step back and put the uniquenesses around the travel industry or systems that we're building on top of ours to support travel on the shelf because they wanted, a product that can work horizontally, that can be plugged in with as little or no customizations whatsoever to get somebody up, as fast as possible so you can move on to the next sale. So, those are really some early lessons that I learned, building on our platform. And now that we, call it, hit it, sitting in board meetings with VCs are much different today. Now it's, oh, what new exciting product are you launching? You know what I mean? So now you can slowly release, some more product as you gain more traction with your MVP.
Yeah, that's great. I'm sure a lot of listeners will be able to take that and hopefully save some months or if not years of their growth from the equation as they look to build what they bring to market. As you look at 2024, what's exciting to you? What's on the horizon for Everywhere?
Yeah, so 2024, you're going to see more and more money movement in real time. So RTP has been around for some time now, and now you have the launch of the Fed now. What that does is actually training consumers. Especially since consumers are now using Cash App, Venmo, and these apps that are moving money in real time, where it just makes a lot more sense for businesses to do the same exact thing. So you're going to see more and more mobile wallets. You're going to see more and more, real time money movement. Whether it's the use case that I gave you, where you're pushing money out to your phone number, or getting paid faster, or you're just basically now sending individuals, me to you, money back and forth by leveraging your phone number. So you're going to look for more use cases around money movement in real time. And I think a lot has to do with it is with the release of the Fed now, because the Fed now is going real time. That's a game changer. That's a game changer because merchants are going to be trained, and that's going to be a differentiator. So if I was to open up a new account and the business is familiar with, oh, I just read an article on Fed Now, and oh, money moves, I shouldn't have to wait 2 days. Well, they're going to look for companies that offer that, and you really want to be ready when they do. Because ultimately that 2 day or 1 day, even, companies are, they live on cash flow. So if they can get paid in minutes and seconds, yeah, sign me up.
Yeah, I love that idea. Sign me up for that one. Great. Well, we're going to switch gears here now. We're going to move to what I call three questions. It's just three questions and three simple answers. Where do you go to think big or to brainstorm?
Well, I just got back from Aspen last night. And so, for me, being somebody that likes to get out there in the mountains, and I went to Aspen solo. So it's not like, I went with a bunch of friends or anything. And really the big reason is because we have a big fundraise coming around the corner. And, I have a lot of, folks that, whether they call it from the first round that, looking to cash in. And I got folks that, want to put more money in, and they just got, hit from all different types of angles, picking the right, new partner because the company's doing really well. And there's a big pool of investors right now that really want to get in. So, and there's also like the teams and the structure around, do I promote within, do I look outside again? So looking at all those different angles, I really just wanted to get away for the weekend by myself and just spend time up in, the mountain. And it was a perfect weekend because it was open weekend also for skiing. And so I was able to ski, be up on the hill, and really just absorb, not only the surroundings, but just get some clarity, look deep inside you, like into your soul, like why are you here? What is your purpose? Not lose track of what you're really after in life. Whether it's to make a difference, down the road, like myself, I have my own plans, whether it's being a philanthropist, somebody out there that's really helping others or giving back, and how you're going to do that. Or, in other words, like there's a bigger cause, behind you. So just really like searching, deep inside, for that. And again, this is just looking over this past weekend that I just came back from. And really the reasoning behind, that trip, was to do just that.
Yeah, that's great. And what a great place to do it. I like to be outdoors too. And you just, something about being connected to the environment or in the wilderness or just in a different space outside of a city, you just think of things differently, and you find answers that you're not as cluttered in your mind around when you're in the day-to-day work or whatever your environment is. That makes a lot of sense to me. What advice have you gotten from another founder that's been priceless to you as a founder?
Yeah, so I tend to read a lot of books, you know what I mean, as well. So really getting the advice of, not necessarily thinking you know it all, right? I think a lot of founders or tend to, whether they lead with like my way is the only way, and and become poor listeners to their team. But I really found that when founders that I looked at as more or less like mentors that built up successful companies and how they did that and really had that entrepreneurial spirit. One is really just being a good listener. I think that was really key, and allow people to make decisions on their own. So allow, folks, and sometimes, again, they're going to fail, and I'm no different. I failed many times. I failed, I failed more times than I can count. I can tell you that. But ultimately, maybe that ability of a founder, and you hear it time and time again, to fail forward. So in other words, like, appreciate your failure. And I think that's kind of hard for people to do, is to kind of appreciate why you failed. And so, leaning on founders that, have a mindset that basically says, hey, man, like failure it's part of the journey. Like you're gonna, like, hey, dude, if you're not failing, like you're doing something really wrong. Like you need to be failing more. And that sometimes it's hard to
Yeah.
as a founder, right? Like fail more. Like he's like, yeah, you're not trying hard enough. How many times you fail this week, So, and I think that's good advice is embrace the failures.
Yeah, I love that. What works for you in staying positive in the world of a startup where, it's a rocky road, lots of ups and downs?
Yeah. So one of the, really the biggest thing I say to that is, man, is my morning routine. No matter what, I get up 2 hours early, so call it like around 5 to 5:30. And I really take advantage of not checking my phone at all. So my phone is off. I don't care Yeah, I'm sure there's some emergencies or hair on fire scenarios that maybe came in over the night. But the last thing I want to do is focusing on what's going on my cell phone. So really gotten a good habit of meditating every single morning, and then going right into a workout routine. It's something that I'm really passionate about. Always in it, and it can be anything. As far as the workouts, it doesn't always have to be like, oh, it's got to lift weights or what have you. But ultimately, it could be like you said, walking in nature, going on a hike, bike ride. I mean, just about anything. So really, getting that early start where, man, like I always say, the hardest thing I'll ever do is my workout routine in the morning. Now everything today is going to come easy, so I already got the hard work over with. The day is going to be easy. And I think by telling myself that, I'm training my brain to think that way, and doing so first thing in the morning versus jumping out of bed 5 minutes before work's going to start, going in the office, having coffee. No, that's not for me. And a lot of our folks in our team and the folks that I tend to lean on and hire are folks that, really have strong morning routines versus, working out late at night, where I don't necessarily disagree with. That may work for some people, but I just feel like starting your day off the right way with meditation, working out, getting up a few hours or an hour earlier is the way to go.
That's great. Well, Austin, I can't believe how quick this time has gone here. If anybody wanted to find you or find Everywhere, where would they go?
So it's just everywhere.com. It's spelled like software, W-A-R-E. So EVERYWARE.com. And it's really just Austin at everywhere.com for my personal information. So really online is the best way to find us. If you live locally here in Austin, chances are, we're not too far from you because we office right downtown, and we've really made a good habit of going into the office. So we're very much involved in the community here, especially in the downtown area. So if you're ever in Austin, definitely look me up. We're a very active, I call it a company in the sense like we love work hard, play hard. We love, partners that basically want to share in some team building experiences and be a little bit more competitive. And, we love even going to just, happy hours and just, shooting the shit and talking. It's a really good community here in Texas, very friendly. I think it's one of the best things about Austin is that not only it's the weirder city, I would say it's the most friendly city. And that's something that, we definitely take advantage of by living here.
Yeah, that's great. Well, you've heard it directly from Austin. If you want to check out and find Everywhere, you know where to go. And if you want to connect with Austin, you know where to go there too. Austin, thanks so much for joining us today. Really appreciate your time and having the courage to come on and share your story, as well as to all of our listeners for listening to us today. Thank you for your time. It means the world to me. I'm Jake Aaron Villarreal. Look forward to catching up with you all on the next episode. Until then, take care. Before we wrap up, I want to give a big shout out to all the entrepreneurs that have joined to make this podcast possible, and for all the listeners for listening. It means the world to me that you chose to spend your time with us today. I'm your host, Jake Aaron Villarreal, signing off for now, but can't wait to connect with you all soon on the next episode. Take care. This show is sponsored by Match Relevant, a company that helps venture-backed startups find the best people in the market, and they do it in 3 simple steps. First, they sit down with founders to understand their story. Second, they tell their story into multiple candidate channels. And third, they schedule interviews within 48 hours. Find us at matchrelevant.com to learn more about how we do it.